Hey, while I was at the Dutch Nationals in the States, the Recon Rumble rumbled. So Alan sent me the lists and the results for his tournament, Recon Rumble, which was a 500-point tournament. So let's go and see what happened, shall we? So this is the meta of the Recon Rumble, and also actually the results, because it's over. The event itself was 500 points, single generic reinforced platoon. There were 12 players. A few more had signed up but dropped out last minute. There was some illness, I guess. And they played 3 games with reduced times and reduced tables. So they had 4x4 tables, which I think is a kind of a nice idea, because otherwise you at 500 points you have so much space to fill out, right? And there was a 12 order dice cap. So no order dice spam. But at 500 points, it's pretty hard to do order dice spam anyway. So it's a really interesting little format here, where you get some strange effects. One of the things that I think Alan had done rather cleverly was that he had disallowed free units. So not a single one of the armies had free units, which meant that you couldn't take the insanity that is British Indians, right? You couldn't go overboard and take French 200 extra points. Um, for low points, especially, that means a lot because those points, percentage-wise, are just way more worth when you get into the low points, right? Because they make up a larger percentage of your army, basically. So it was really interesting to see really low points. How did that meta sort of work out? And I think we're going to be surprised a little bit by some of the things that happens at this low point cost. So um, the order dice, this was not the order dice average. Right, it was 13.8. I wrote the damn wrong thing. Um, no, it was 12.8. Sorry. Um, no, what was it? I sat and calculated. I wrote the wrong thing down. Anyways, the order dice were between 7 and 12. 7 being the lowest and 12 the highest with the order dice cap. Only one list was at 12 order dice, which was a little bit of a surprise, but at 500 points it's really difficult to push all the way up there anyway, so not that much of a surprise. Most lists were around the 9 to 10 mark, the Goldilocks zone of 500 dice, 500 points, I guess. So pretty much as expected, I think. I haven't seen many events at 500 points, but when you get into those low points, the first thing you do is you fill out the small teams and you fill out the lieutenants, right? And they are pretty easy order dice. So a lot of the army lists will have 5 order dice before you've even spent 100 points. So 9 to 10 is what I would expect. Right. Nations. As expected, I guess, because it was an American event, we had a lot of American lists. I also think that there was a lot of American lists simply because it was the pack itself lent itself towards skirmishing, and we'll see this in a minute. But and American skirmishes are clearly the best. so so a lot of American lists, an equal amount of British and German lists, and one Soviet. So very few Soviets. I think Soviets going into the low point scores actually become worse because there's no reason to take many of the units that famously make up for the Soviet numbers, right? Um, the Darker Steward is out at that point cost. The free unit, of course, is out. The dog mines are not going to be massively effective because you're not going to see many tanks. So lots of that just goes away. So the only thing here for me is that like half of the units, half of the platoons were Americans. That was a little bit more than I'd expected, but not a massive amount. And I also think I expected like one person to try mine a nation. They didn't. I would have, I think. I would have brought my partisans for 500 points, just because you can get some really cheap units for those. So, but, and the army builds. As expected, loads of skirmish army builds. Um, Lots of the army builds that didn't classify as skirmishes still had skirmishes for their infantry. Um, 3 had pseudo tank builds with 2 or maybe even a third armored vehicles or vehicles because they didn't have the points for armored vehicles. The most normally taken German tank was the Panzer I. Um, so was just a weird little thing that happened. Um, but I understand because it's an armored tank, and you expect to see a lot of infantry. So yeah, I think the Panzer I actually could do well. 2 armies were hordes, Strafbat hordes mostly. One was a Recce army, FSSF Scouts in American Army, had 3 or 4 of these. 2 of the German lists were gear-heavy lists, which normally I would not recommend doing, but it does give you quite a lot of punch. You're also spending quite a lot of points on it, but it does give you quite a lot of punch, which is an interesting idea, right? To have quite a lot of pushing power in a few units, because you're only ever going to have a few units no matter what you do. One list had an air observer, which may actually be worth it in this format because you're not going to see much flak. And one list had more than one flamer, so into the barbecue area, even though it's not really barbecue because you don't get 4+ flamers in the lists, not at 500 points anyway. So that was the spread. Very much what we expect sort of from tournaments by now. Lots of skirmish, a few lists that does something weird. The only thing that I would have expected maybe was one list that had tried something with cavalry, or one list that would have tried something with assaults. That didn't really happen. So the list rankings for me was between 1.5, the thematic to bad, to 4, the very, very strong. And the average was 2.7, although only a few lists were below 3, but they pulled down the rest. And only one list was a 4 for me. So before I viewed, because Alan sent me the results along with the lists, but before I reviewed the results, I actually made predictions for what I would see in the results. Let's go and check them out. So I would expect Stephen with his 11 order Soviets, which was a Strafbat horde with barbecue tanks. He had a BA-20 and an OT whatever, one of those light tanks that has a flamethrower, right? For me, that was a 4 list. At 500 points, that was really, really strong. He had a lot of units and he had barbecuing. So I really expect him to do well. Corey, with his 9 orderized Germans, who he had brought Feldjägers and Strafbat, that combo where you remove the minuses for Strafbat. That was a 3.5 for me and could do well, especially with like skirmished and ranged. Bill had brought 10 orderized Americans, skirmish plus the air observer, as I said before. If that air observer could actually work, I don't think he would see much flag, and he might actually do something really great. George, 10 orderized Americans, also skirmish army, also a 3.5, and then Bob with his 9 orderized USA with the FSSF Scouts, also a 3.5. Those were my predictions. Now, do they hold? A little bit. We had Corey and George were the only ones, right? And Bill, but that was the other Bill. So Corey and George were the only ones whom I have actually predicted to go in the top. Right at the very top was Ken with his 7 orderized Germans, and he had brought gear and panzer. And for me, that was a huge surprise. that someone actually won with a German list that had brought lots of assault rifles and LMGs, and he bought the armor as well. I did not see this coming. Corey was of course predicted with the Feldjäger Strafbat combo. That's an awesome combination. Very, very cool. George with his Skirmish Americans, also a very cool list. Matt with his 12 Ordinized Brits. I did not see that coming as well. He had brought regular infantry with rifles, 6-man units, so pretty good skirmish build. For nations, I thought the Americans would have this. And then Bill C with his 8 Ordinized British, and he had also brought gear and then universal carriers, 2 of those for his engineers and was that stubborn commandos or something. So again, low order dice counts, and the results are just all over the place for me. I don't know what we can learn from this, but I'm really interested in hearing from more people out there who do these recon rumbles to see if we can glean something about what happens to the game when you go very, very low on points. Because it seems like something weird is happening, and the usual predictions are usual meta goes away and something new starts to happen, which is amazing. I love that. So let me know if you guys are doing Recon Rumbles, and let me know the results, please. Cheers.